Welcome everyone. Today, Thursday, another night of this live sessions. My name is Alejandro Garay, and I'm with Maaco in Llano Lakes, Florida. I want to thank everyone that watched last night. We have Jose with Las Vegas Model Cars. Hope you enjoy. If you haven't seen it, it's in our IGTV. Now we can save these live sessions there, so you can go back and check them out if you missed the live session here. We have a few people already join. Gonna give it a couple minutes before we bring the guests tonight. I want to show you for tomorrow. We're gonna have Sir Wayne Birdmore. It's going to be 6 p.m. Eastern time, so it will be slightly different than every night since he is in Europe. So the time difference, we're going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And also, I want to remind you guys that we're doing a giveaway with our Luma people here. So if you haven't seen it, just go check our post or their post. Both will work for the entries. Let me see if I can find it here. I can show you guys right there. So I know many of you already enter, but it's pretty simple. Just tag at least 3 painters on the comment. If you want to tag more than one painter that you know, just please do it in only one comment, and that would be a valid entry. This giveaway is worldwide, so it doesn't matter where you are located. Luma is giving away with us one Aurora, which it will fit pretty much any gun. So the winner will pick the attachment. They also just released the hose hang, so they kindly add this to the giveaway and a couple years there. So for tonight, let me take this out here and let me bring our guest. Let's give it just a second here. Hey, Tony.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you for joining tonight. If you need a second there to set that up, it's all good. I'm going to say hello to the people join here. We have Eric, we have Marcos, we have Tony. There's a bunch of people here. We have Steve. Jeremy, thank you for joining tonight. Maria Luisa, she's my mom. She doesn't speak English, but she's here tonight. How's your Spanish?
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
What do you mean? We're not going to do this in Spanish?
Well, you can, but I'll just answer randomly.
All right, Tony. So there's besides my mom, there's many people that have no idea who you are. So if you want to, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how are you related to the industry, that would be great.
All right. Well, my name is Tony Larimer. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Danam Company. And Danam Company is for the USA, the exclusive importer for SADA painting equipment, breathing equipment, filters, everything for the USA and Puerto Rico. And so we are in charge of all the sales, marketing, distribution, warranty, technical services, product support, everything for the US.
Okay. So I know there's a little bit of confusion, about Danam and SADA because we see SADA by Danam a lot. We see them like together almost as the same company all over. So how that relationship started, like back in the day, was just a distributor? Was it, what?
SADA is obviously its own company, and they're based out of near Stuttgart, Germany, in Kornwestheim. And we're an importer for them. And that started way back in 1981. Um, and it was the Jorgensen family. So there was a father named Hans and two sons, Bent and then Knut, and they had been in the paint industry. They were from Denmark. They had a trucking and crane operations services, and they sold all that, and they moved to the U.S. And back then they went through Ellis Island and did all the procedures they should, and they had to have money to come in, and so they brought with them about whatever they sold their company for, they brought with them, and they had to start a new business or take over one that was failing, and there was a lot of Midwest farms that were failing, and so they had taken a look, and in Minnesota there was a farm for sale that was next door to a high school friend of Hans's that had already moved there about a few years before. So they decided to move to the U.S. and Hans had some agricultural background from his youth, and so he said, "Well, I can do that." So they started a farm, but it was a small little 80-acre farm, and to supplement their income, he went to work for a body shop in this area, and Knut went to work for a welding manufacturing company, and they started out just from ground up, but they had seen many things in the paint world in Europe. So when they were in Denmark, they were watching people spray polyester, but it was a 1K body filler putty, and they were spraying it with a SATA KLP gun, a polyester gun. And so Hans went back to Europe and brought back some of the polyester, and they brought back some of the SATA guns, including the polyester gun and back then there was a siphon gun we called a Jet H, but then the Jet B gravity fed spray gun, and they brought those back into the U.S. And they would go to these local body shop association meetings and share those. Well, then the family decided they got to know someone in a restoration shop that was struggling to keep up or to get things done. And so the Jorgensen family bought an old kind of a farmhouse building right near that restoration shop, and built a paint booth out of a 2-bay chicken coop, and they built it into a paint shop for the restoration shop. So they started painting and using these products from Europe. Well, they were also importing in butter and cheese from Denmark, and clothing and other products. They brought in welders and stuff from Europe and started to sell those. But the SATA line, when they started to bring that in, Hans, the dad, got a hold of the export manager for SATA Germany and just said, "I'd really like to be the importer for the U.S." Well, at that time, SATA didn't have the philosophy of just one importer, so they let him import. So you wire us the money, we'll send you the equipment. And they started bringing in breathing hoods and spray guns and that kind of thing, and filters. And pretty soon but they had also grown their restoration company to quite large, where they had 100 cars in process, and actually grew it to a pretty big business. And then as the importing thing was getting more and more lucrative, and they backed more and more from the body shop side and the towing company that they had, and decided to do more of the importing. And so that they really took off. So in 1981 was really they moved here in 76. Didn't speak a word of English. Mm-hmm. And by 1981, we're importing SATA spray equipment and starting to sell it through a big part of the country. And then later on, there was a couple of other people importing it. So there was one out in upstate New York, and they bought the rights to that. And then one on the West Coast. They bought out Eurotech's SATA contract and started selling to the West Coast. And then in about 2000, then they bought out a company out of Salt Lake City that was in the Mountain States. So now ever since 2000, we've been the exclusive one for the U.S. So nice. They grew it from really a small, and they always tell stories about their one-page catalog, price list.
Well, that was easy to manage.
Yeah, that was a lot easier. When I started here in March of 96, things were a lot thinner, a lot easier too, a lot less.
Yeah. So before we move into your side of the story, tell me, like, SATA was already at that point, like when they moved here, the Danam people moved here and all that, SATA was already popular, was one of the few manufacturing guns. I don't know much about the
Oh,
history of
yeah,
guns.
yeah. No, SADA started actually in 1907 making hospital equipment, surgical equipment over in Germany. And their first spray gun actually was in 1920. They worked on it in 1924 and introduced it in 1925 as a joint venture over there with a paint company, Leckler, that was looking for a spray gun to spray paint because they had seen some of the older technology Bink stuff that had been done then or developed this back in those days and at automated plants by Ford in
Mhm.
Detroit, and they wanted to be able to spray. So they did a joint venture and they built a gun they called the LM series, um, and then that started it. But really, they were more on the architectural side of paint equipment up all the way through 1957, and then in the 50s, late 50s, they introduced a gun that could be used more towards automotive. But their real leap forward, SADA was not in the USA. They were very, very strong in Europe. So Germany, Austria, Italy, that part of the world, they were very, very strong. From the beginning.
So
They
basically, all the vehicle manufacturers that we know, like the most popular ones, they were using it back
Well,
then, basically.
yeah, they were using it more on the refinish side and at the paint company color labs in Europe and in
Oh,
Germany in
okay.
particular. But when 1981 happened, Hans Jorgensen and Knut were smart enough to realize they needed to get with all of these paint companies and then in the training centers. And so they purchased 150 spray guns and put them in all of the training centers for BASF. And then later Spies Hecker came in and AXO was here. And a lot of the European stuff was here. And then eventually it migrated over to where the American companies like the Sherwins and the PPGs and DuPonts at that time. And all of them started taking a hard look. And we started forming relationships right away with all of them because of the quality. At first, the upside down gravity feed spray gun, everybody talked about it as being the upside down guns because they were used to
Uh-huh.
all siphon guns here. Yeah, that was a big change. Um,
And we talk, kind of lightly about like, oh, buying 150 guns back
yeah,
then. I can't even imagine like that step was probably huge for them
that
and
was
a
a
big
big step back
investment.
then.
And
Yeah, that's a really big step to do that and take that and to absorb that cost and move forward and try and get the marketing out there. But they did a good job. Right away, there were some shows that used to happen, like in Chicago. There was one called the Big Eye Show, and before NACE and stuff like that happened. And so they did go to those, and they had a small booth set up, and they were on display and touring around the country, in a Mercedes Benz that Hans had, pulling a small trailer to these trade shows. So what a difference today. But they
no
really had
Instagram, right?
spent a lot of years to build a very good marketing program together with SADA Germany. And quite honest, the last 20 plus years, SADA Germany's marketing team has really, really become state of the art, and they've done a heck of a job over there at building a brand and building a reputation. And when you're building equipment that has tolerances down in 1 micron range, but you need to be able to explain that and get that marketing word out and reach your customers, and I think they've done a very good job of that.
So tell me, how did you met Danam? How did you ended up on it? Like what you were doing before?
Yeah, I grew up about 20 miles from here in a small town, and Spring Valley, where we're located, is only about 2,400 people, so a pretty little small community. But about 20 miles away was another town about the same size that I grew up in, and I was, you know, all the way through high school and things painting cars, out of necessity because my uncle was a body man and my dad was an upholsterer, and we were doing street rods and cars and whatever. But we had to get paint on them, and so I was lucky to have a couple of good tutors. So we were doing that, but I had met the Jorgensen family simply because their word was out. There's these guys running a restoration shop that had these great Danish accents and were
Hmm.
selling these upside down spray guns, and so I got to meet them in the early '80s and knew of them. And I had moved, went through college and all of all of those days and got my business administration and marketing degree, and then decided when I got out of there, I went to work for the Mayo Clinic for a little while, and I decided that wasn't for me wearing a suit to work every day. So I got a hold of my uncle who had transitioned from the body shop and paintwork into working for, he was a rep for Sherwin-Williams on their Martin Senior brand. And I
Hmm.
just said, see if you can get me an interview. And so he got me an interview and took a little time, and I ended up working there for about between 6 and 7 years. Worked out of Chicago for a while, and then I transferred down to Iowa and Nebraska and worked in that market for about 6 years. And I ran into, I was home in this neighborhood for a weekend, and the guy that was a sales manager at the time for Danam was at a party that I went to, and I was talking with him, and I said, well, how's it going? He said, well, he said, I just got this opportunity. I'm going to take over managing a body shop at a dealership, locally. I don't want to do this traveling. I don't think this is for me. So he was going to resign on Monday. So I waited until Monday, and I called Canute and just said, hey, I heard you're looking for a sales manager. Well, Tom hadn't told him yet. He goes, what? No, I got Tom. I said, well, you better go talk to him. I think he's leaving. So, but I got the interview. It came up that next week, and ended up coming to an agreement and took that job, and been here ever since and loved it. The company's grown like crazy, and having their family support. It's a family business. The
And not so many
product,
people know that, we see it, and we only have one conversation on the phone, like that's how much we know each other. And you mentioned that, and anytime that I hear, family owned, because of, our own business too,
yep,
it's just touch, your heart when you hear that, and
yep,
you see this success. But many people don't know that because they see it as this huge company, and, same thing with
yeah,
SATA, right?
yeah, yeah. No, Sada Germany is I would say, that in Germany they're kind of labeled a mid-sized company.
Okay.
They have about 260 employees in their factory that include marketing, administration, sales, technical, but their R&D group is about 10 or 11% of their company staff. So they're well
We're gonna,
equipped in R&D.
yeah, we're gonna
Very
talk
good.
about that too.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But they have also, but Sada Germany also, the family Kreidler owns it, and they have put that company in a trust, and so their grandkids are still on the board of trustees, and they have a board, and there's a managing director, CEO named Albert Cruza that's been there now over the last 21, 22 years, probably. Has done an outstanding job at really pushing things hard to move forward with, in marketing, sales, and technology. So really,
So
yeah.
on your end, like here from Danam, like you guys, since you're like exclusive, distributors, and have this tight relationship with them, is you have the freedom to do pretty much whatever you want on the marketing side. You need to their
Um,
approval. How's the work
Yeah, I
like?
would no. They definitely give us guidelines. They have their view of what they want their company to look like is important, and it's important to us to follow that. Yes, we have a little leeway. We do a lot of our own video. We do all of our own videos. We do all of our own social media. Um, but we follow their guidelines in marketing and ads and things to make sure that it meets with what they want their worldwide view to be. But they have a
Okay.
great team in marketing there. It's a really good team.
So you've been the sales and marketing like since you started, like until today, pretty much. Like
Yeah.
you've been
Yeah.
so.
So we have a lady named Andrea Hint that works under me that is our advertising guru. I mean, she's incredible at design and putting our ads together, and she works closely with all the magazines and our social media stuff. She does a lot of that, and um, I work more, overlooking that and seeing how that's going, and we'll discuss as a group what, okay, for the July issues, what are we going to feature, and we talk about all that. And myself and a guy named Chris Springer, who's one of our technical managers out east, and one of our eastern regionals, name is Jim Kovatic, and Jason Gravenoff, who works in the office with us a lot and travels on both automotive and industrial. We all work as a team together with the owner, Knut, to come up with what promos and specials and what are we going to talk about. Usually it's more about what do we need to get the message out about. And we work with Sada Germany, and they'll give us some ads, and then we edit those ads to be American, because when we look at the ads in Europe, they don't put any part numbers on the page, or anything like
Mhm.
that. It's just a clean picture of a spray gun and maybe a couple bullet points. Here, people want to know what's the part number because they want to call the distributor and order it, and the distributor may or may not decide to even take the time to look that up. So if you have the part number on there, it makes it so much simpler to say, here's what I want, give me this part number, and it gets ordered. And so we choose to go that way. We'll edit the verbiage so it's more understood with the slang from here. But we also do a lot of things like, our own magazine, the SADA News.
I was gonna say I received that today. I have it right here too.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's been a good one. That one, it's a good
yeah,
mix. It's a good mix of advertising. There's good articles in it. Usually tips on how to be more efficient. We try to put, this issue that came out. We kind of do a recap of SEMA for those that weren't there. And
I saw
um,
that, and I was talking with Todd actually earlier because his gun actually made it to SEMA too with
yeah,
Island Customs, and
yeah,
uh,
absolutely, out of Hawaii.
yeah. So
Yeah,
it was funny because I was reading it like literally like 15 minutes ago, and I snapped a picture of the page, and I'm
yeah,
like, hey, congratulations, because sometimes, and especially nowadays with all this going on, which we're going to talk about it, now, you miss certain things, right? And if you weren't just, in SEMA, you missed it, right? So I definitely want to talk to you about SEMA, but before we go there, how's the current situation affecting the distribution? I All that I can tell you on my end, and this is how everything started. I contacted you about the Vision 5000. You put me in contact with the local distribution, and I think it took like 7 business days. I had everything in the shop. Um,
good.
so I don't know anything else. I don't know if that's normal or this
Well,
whole
normally
situation
we
is.
probably have been somewhat faster than that. I mean, because a lot of the distributors have really, their sales team aren't necessarily out making sales calls.
Mhm.
So they're working from home or home office, and they have limited hours in some of those stores. So when you place an order, sometimes it has to fall between a shorter hours, and then when they have to get a hold of their purchasing person to make the purchase, it can take a day or so extra. But normally, yeah, that process. But we're farthest away. You're in southern Florida, and we're up in the north in Minnesota. So I would say to get that in 7 days is a little longer than usual. But we ship um, we ship typically everything is definitely out of our building usually with the same day, but most it's always out within 24 hours of an order. So we pride ourselves on that, and so that's important for us. And
And
we keep a massive inventory. So we're looking in our building between Danam, Air, and SADA. We probably have 6.5, almost $7 million in inventory. So we keep a big number so that we can support things. Because things happen, and we get lucky that we keep the inventory we do. It got us through. With this whole COVID thing and out of Europe, when they cut all of the passenger planes flying over the ocean, we rely on a lot of that because we fly all of our freight. Our RPS cups in the cases come by sea in containers, but everything else flies here. And so in every 2 weeks, we get our shipments. And when we get our shipments, they come mostly by passenger plane in the belly of a passenger plane, and we can have 14 to 35 pallets of material at a time. And so usually what would happen is it may end up on 2 or 3 passenger planes, and it ends up in Chicago where customs collects it. And then
Mhm.
our broker collects it, and then it clears customs. So our freight leaves Germany on a Friday. It gets to Chicago on Saturday, and most often we have it in Minnesota by Tuesday. And so it usually goes that quickly. Well, that slowed down a little bit with all of this, and things could leave SADA, end up at a airport in Stuttgart, and could sit there for 2 weeks waiting for a plane because now it's all got to go cargo. And of
Okay.
course, now a couple other things. Now that there is less space, they've raised the prices almost 5 times the amount. So
Mm.
now a pallet that could normally cost you $600 is costing, $1,700 to $2,500 to get a pallet of spray equipment. And I think the good news is we had good inventory. SADA Germany had good inventory, and so they really got hit hard in that Stuttgart area. And the factory took great precautions of keeping people apart. So in many departments, if they had four people working in one small area, they broke them up in shifts where there was only one person in each area at a time, and they had a 1 hour gap between for sanitizing and disinfecting. And then the next shift would come in, and they did a great job of that. And they worked closely with their biggest concern for them was getting their raw materials, their stainless steel and the brass and billet aluminum and all the part. They had to so they had to rely on all of their suppliers, which are all within about 180 kilometers of the
Okay.
factory. They have just-in-time inventory in their factory where they make it. So when they scan the Kanban card on the pallet, or they scan in a stick of billet or a stick of um, stainless, uh, if it met the order minimum or whatever it got down to, then that company has to have it there within 3 hours. Well, that's difficult during these times, and so that was a little scary, but yet they managed it. They did a great job, and really never we really didn't see too much difficulty there.
Yeah, so in the cover of the magazine, it says like something like "be kind" or something like that. And it reminds me that probably people, now need to understand also if you buy something during these times to, be patient. It's
Yeah,
gonna arrive. If you want it like next day, it's not gonna happen.
right.
But so how often do you go there? Do you go like and what's the reasons normally why you go, to Germany?
Usually I go there myself. Many of our representatives are um, different tech reps that work for us. We go over twice a year. So I usually go in May, end of April, early May, or in September, which it's completely coincidental, but it's right during all the same times as the beer festivals in Germany. So it's a pure coincidence.
Before
Um,
anyone make any joke, you say it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. But we go there for training, so we go over and we'll land on a. I usually go in early, so we'll leave on Thursday, arriving Friday morning, and then we'll go have meetings all day Friday, um, and then overnight we'll go out for dinner Friday night. But then Saturday, usually our guests arrive if we have guests, and we'll pick them up at the airport, and then we're only about 10 minutes away from Porsche. And so we'll maybe go visit their museum or do something cool locally. And then we'll go
Uh-huh.
tour somewhere on Sunday and see the sights and see the food and everything. And then Monday through Wednesday, we're in our training center, and we really do a pretty in-depth job at teaching our distribution partners or our reps and in those classes. So, and then I'll usually stay a day after if we have follow-up meetings, but we do that twice a year.
So the gun and every product is 100% manufactured there.
Yeah,
Uh,
the only thing, I mean, there's some pieces. So like if you have a SATA filter, they don't make the glass lens for the gauge, and so they'll have suppliers nearby. But yeah,
mhm.
everything is assembled there then or manufactured. So anything metal, they make in house. The RPS cups are it's their tooling, SATA's tooling, that they design and develop, and but it's in two separate manufacturing facilities, both within a very, very close proximity. And then they have their own logistics center where both of those companies deliver those products to. And it's a pretty crazy process that they use. I mean, the number of molds that they use and the way they mix, the lid molds versus the cup molds, how they do that in such a complicated manner to make sure you're not wearing one tool, out. It's amazing how they do that, and they keep that straight, and they do an incredible job of delivering those products to us. So
That's
we're
that kind of reminds me of when we announced that you were going to be on it, and people start, to DM me, or I post, the other day about the 500 vision, that arrived. People talk about prices, right? And when you describe, again, just a portion of the process, I think we're all missing that part, right? When we
Yeah,
complain
no,
about
it's
prices.
expensive. The part they don't see, like, and I did read the post about the Vision Hood, And and the person made a comment that it's like 4 times the price of a spray gun, which they're drastically wrong because
He's
that
in South Africa.
okay, that made that
Mhm.
that could be different then.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
that's something that if we can get their contact info, I can get that addressed with the importer in South Africa, so that they can do a better job of getting information out. Because here we spend a huge amount of time to try to get the word out, and we're available whether it's on video or on having conversations like this, um, to do several webinars. We do whatever we can to get the word out. But that Vision hood really is pretty inexpensive, compared
For
to
what it is.
buying charcoal. Yeah, for what it is. Yeah, it is very inexpensive.
Yeah,
You know.
well, not only, the quality of the product itself, like, what it's gonna do for your health and since we started this live sessions, I basically realized that, and it hit me, and that's what we made the move. And I'm proud that we did it. Even we've been open this long, and I think that anyone that want to do the move, please do it. And anyone that I've seen now, with, wearing a half mask and stuff like that, I will comment something about it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's good.
Uh, and I
Yeah,
think, everyone, should be in the same page on that. We actually have a meeting, today with all the Maacos. We're near like 600 or 700 right now. Um, and talking about operations and some stuff. And I basically put my word out on, this should be mandatory. This should be something across the board in the whole company. We have to do this, it needs to be a priority. Like,
right.
um, so is is there anything like that you guys can do or do to put the word out, like on the marketing side?
Yeah,
Uh,
we have a few things now on marketing. I mean, marketing, advertising, just manuals that we have. I mean, we have one brochure, this perfect paint job, perfect paint applications, that inside of it has everything from breathing equipment to filtration, getting the air clean. We today's products that we're using with low VOC and with water, the air has to be cleaner. And the nice thing is the sauna filtration gives us breathing air quality that we can paint with. So now we have both in one filter. You have both things handled. So you're not buying a separate breathing system and a separate paint filtering system. This does both, and it's a high air volume. So our filters, the smallest one we make is a 70 CFM filter. The larger one's 129 and a half, 130 CFM filter, and so you can run a lot of painters off of that. And so when we start using breathing hoods that are running from 6 to 10 CFM a piece, depending on the air settings, and HVLP spray guns at 15 CFM,
mhm.
and air blowers, our air blower for blow drying water is the lowest CFM one out there in the market, and it uses 9.3 CFM. But all of the other ones that are out there, some of the copy ones and the Chinese ones we see, and some of the junk that gets purchased to blow dry waterborne, and it's using 20, 21 CFM per tool, and you try to run two of those or three of those in a shop, how many people have an extra 60 CFM? That's a 15 horse, to 20 horse compressor to get that kind of number, and most people don't have that kind of air volume to make those tools even work. So it really is
Correct.
hard on your economics in your shop. Now your compressor's running nonstop. All of those things get really expensive. So efficiencies, having the right filters, that allow airflow, and that I only need to maintain one filter, and I can use 3 breathing hoods or 4 breathing hoods off of it, becomes very efficient, and it's a lot less expensive to use than even charcoal half mass.
So when the wall filtration like came in the picture, like it was at the same time with the hood, it was something in
Yeah,
conjunction, or
SADA started their filters in 1931. So they've had them a long time. And when I started here, we had a filter. We had 2 of them. One was called a 144 series, and we had a 300 series. And then about 12 years ago, we did a 400 series filter that was just a step up in air volume, lower maintenance, everything. But they're super low maintenance and they are super high degree of particle separation. And that's the biggest problem. People think is they get so used to saying, well, I'm going to put water in my shop, or I want to have dry air. So they think putting desiccant beads in their booth is going to fix that. And it might work temporarily for a couple days. And then the beads are saturated and they're garbage and they swell up and fracture and break. And you've got dust and debris that's getting into your paintwork because that dusty silica dust is the last stage on a filter. So SADA doesn't do that. They go through a different process with it, with a water cyclone device that spins the air to throw it to the outside with a sintered and then an fully automatic drain valve. And then we go through a whole sintered bronze cartridge that's the largest one in the industry for surface area to clean it. And we have a fine filter that goes down to 0.01 microns. So it's absolutely fine. And then we add charcoal behind that for the odors and oil vapor. So now we're not just taking out the humidity, we're taking out the oil vapors and all the contaminants that cause the paint problems. So all of that's done with a filter that's pretty simple. So yeah, those are important, and the word's getting out. And our numbers in filtration sales continue to grow, and our replacement cartridges continue to grow in numbers. So it's getting better. The paint company training centers, almost all of them, are using all of our filtration. They have our breathing hoods. They use our aluminum Danam airlines. So we're doing a good job of getting that out. We just hope someday people get to go back to the training centers again. Right now
Yeah.
they're all closed.
So how is the company like? And I was asking this also with, we have couple people here that they were like, tools manufacturers, or how do you guys handle feedback? Like as SATA, right? Is you say R&D is a big, percentage of the company there, which clearly, we can see that. But what happened with the, again, social media today, you are in contact with so many people, like locals and people, I call it, the 1,000 followers, right? Like, so how does it work? The feedback, did they take it? They don't care?
Oh no, that everything is taken to heart. We find, there's ways to develop a spray gun, and it's based on a lot of things. It's based on government regulations, what VOC laws changed. It's based on what our competitors do. But the most important three things are really more on what are painters asking for, and why. What are we doing that could be improved on? And really, it's all based on how do we have to drive passion, and you have to have that passion in R&D as well as in sales and in marketing but one thing I really like is they're passionate about asking our questions, asking our opinions, and asking what do we think. Now they're German, so they sometimes don't always listen, but we pick on about that. But now they do an incredible, honestly, I think better than any company I've seen, taking feedback and figuring out a better way. And that's what drives them. They drive to get better every single day. And they use a program there called Synchro, which is really 5S on steroids. And Synchro is incredible. From administration through production, everything has a process. Everything has to be determined. And they have these Synchro meetings in every single department every day. They have this red table, or a table with a red tablecloth. And they meet at that every day at a certain time. They've got a list of topics that they want to discuss. They look at their numbers. How did we meet it? How did we meet our, not only our production goals, but our production quality goals, up at where you want that at 100% and all of that. How are we hitting those numbers? And they discuss that in those meetings. And then every day, every department head meets at lunch. They have working lunch where they sit down with the CEO and they discuss everything that went on. If they had, let's say we send in a repair claim that we had questions on, or that's discussed immediately the day that we turn that in, that gets presented at lunch, and then they can discuss a way to fix it. And so finding solutions very quickly, they're very, very good at.
So which product, let's say maybe a gun will be easier, I think, that is being developed already, that a portion of the functionality is feedback and a portion is R&D, or a portion is like really like SATA, raise the bar on this one? Like put out something that it wasn't even a need, and now everyone is talking about it.
Well, there's a couple things. We saw a need um, for a solvent gun. The rest of the world is turning to water. Um, but in the USA, we're still around 50%, maybe just slightly less than that now, probably 45% solvent with low VOC products and solvent. And we saw a need in the US that was different than other parts of the world because of the VOC laws here are pushing them into exempt solvents using oxol and acetone, which act completely differently than the solvents in Europe or anywhere else. So we had to talk to the R&D team, and it wasn't because in many cases it was lower viscosity than what they were dealing with, but you can't just take their solvent, their 3.5 VOC solvent, and add extra thinner to it and make it spray like our exempt stuff. So we had to bring their team here because oxol and acetone are banned substances in Europe. So it isn't like you can just ship it over there. And if we have to do testing, when we have to have a spray gun tested for approval, we send it to the Fraunhofer Institute. And if we send a couple gallons of, let's say, a case of clear and the hardener and the thinner, just the added packaging costs and paperwork costs an extra $8,000 just to freight that in. And they have to document every gram of that product, what they used and what was left, and then it has to go to a hazardous disposal site. So they can't just randomly test it in their factory. So we bring the R&D team here, and we'll go to different paint labs or to our own booth in our facility and spray 150 panels testing changes to the nozzles. And they bring a couple of the people from R&D, three of them, the head of R&D, and two techs that can actually make the adjustments to the nozzles while they're here and try different things. It's pretty cool how they can do that. So they really take that matter seriously. And because of that, we ended up introducing this blue gun called the SadaJet 1500B Solve gun. It's only got two choices of nozzles. It's a 1.3 or a 1.4, and it's available in HVLP or RP. And myself, I use the 1.3 RP or the 1.4 in the HVLP, and it'll spray any base coat or clear coat that we throw at it. So it's a cool tool. That one was needed, but it wasn't really well-known needed, but it ended up being a real nice deal for us. But the next big one, and I think the one everybody still talks about, is our SadaJet X 5500.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's so many paint companies that have so many needs because they use different solvent blends or they have, and we're fighting with so many different climates in the USA,
Mm-hmm.
hot, dry to cool, wet. And we had to come up, and then you have painters that like to paint close and fast with a real tight overlap, and some that like to be a little further away and not such an overlap. And we had to come up with a way, rather than those painters having to change the way they spray to the way a gun functions, we tried to finally do something different. And Sada did a great job because over the years, we had made so many specific nozzle sets for so many specific paint companies that in a 4,000 gun or even a 5,000, I mean, we had our WSB nozzle in the HVLP for spraying some waters. It had a tall, thin, eye-shaped fan for
Mm-hmm.
years. And then in RP, we made a 1.2W that was a stretched fan with narrower center and stretched, and that worked for some of the water. But then we had hot dry climate stuff that was called a 1.4 hot HC for hot climate that was a more focused wet, more of an O-shaped fan. So we had all this stuff, but if I switched from a 1.2 to a 1.3 to a 1.4 because the temperature went up, I had different shape, different size fans, and you had to change the way you painted with every single nozzle you changed to. So Sada came out with this I and O shaped fans for this X gun and reset the clock and said, we're going to start from a 1.1 nozzle set all the way up to in the beginning to a 1.5, and a 1.1 and a 1.5 have the same shape fan. The eyes all had the same shape fan. The O's all had the same shape fan, but they were just slightly wetter as you went up the scale, about 10% wetter. And so they made it linear. And that really has, it's difficult at first to figure out if you're an eye painter or an O painter, but once you figure it out, now it's easy. And from here forward, it'll make a lot more sense. But it really has helped for a painter to define what they like, how they like to spray. And there's not that drastic of a difference between an I and an O. It may be a overall outside dimension of the fan might be 3/4 of an inch shorter on an O, but the wet zone in the middle is much narrower. It's shorter and wider,
Mm-hmm.
so it wets up. And so now you have to force yourself to paint closer to keep a closer overlap and a higher overlap to keep paint even. So if you like to paint close and fast, that one's perfect. if you like to back up, the I shape has a stretched wet center all the way to the edges of the fan. So now I can slow down, back up a little bit. Maybe I like the more soft feel of that, a little more controlled. I don't need the speed, and that works great for a lot of people too. So now we have the best of both worlds.
So I believe that this is like this improvement is 100% feedback. I think is it or trying to accommodate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how the company like keep up with the technology on the materials and the changes in materials like
Well,
because
well,
especially now.
SATA has a great team over there in technical, where they have people that travel the world chasing chasing needs, chasing problems. They'll go into an OEM facility, could be painting pianos, or they could be painting cars, or they could be manufacturing anything, or body shops where they just struggle, and see what's going on, see what we have that can help, and bring what they see back to work with them in the office, and that helps. They listen a lot with us. We work very closely with all of the paint companies, with the technical labs, the color labs. Um, we have a great team because everybody on our team paints. So from our industrial manager Mike to Jason, who handles both industrial and automotive, he's a painter. Um, we have Chris Springer, who worked for 20 years with PPG in both training and product analysis applications, and then he was responsible for training all of the platinum distributor tech reps. And Jim, our Eastern Regional, was a trainer for PPG and right in Pittsburgh for 10 years. And Knut, the president of our company, paints his own stuff. It's got a battery warning. Trying to plug my charger back in here. But yeah, we have a great team. Our repair station manager is a guy that's been painting since he was a kid. And he's sprayed everything from body shop to he painted all of the Featherlight trailers for all the NASCAR teams, and back before they used vinyl, so everything was painted. So
Well,
he airbrushed them all, running from an airbrush to a pressure feed gun. So when you talk to him about a repair, he knows what he's doing. He's been painting his whole life. So you're talking to a guy that knows it because he uses it. So that I think
okay.
helps us with our team.
So which
Okay,
you got it?
maybe. Let's see if I can get this here. We could work on product development in a phone holder, though. That's the next step.
I'm gonna send you a tripod next time.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Stay there. All right. That'll be close enough for now.
Yeah. So which product do you think that that is still out there? It's not getting that much attention and it should. There's any product there that you feel that it should be in every shop and still is not cutting.
Well, I think definitely that one of the products that we have that's one of the biggest workhorses that we make is this little gun called a Mini Jet 4400. Everybody thinks because it's smaller that it's for just doing real small damage, and it's actually much better than that. I'll try this. Hold it. That little gun has about a 7-inch fan, so you can paint a Hyundai, or you can paint a bumper cover. If you have to paint, half your bumper cover, it works great. It works we have a 1-2 SR nozzle set for it that you can spray base, clear, single stage, anything you need. Plus we have a 1.4 nozzle in it. So if you're painting full, bumper covers and things, we can put that 1.4 nozzle in it, but that also sprays 2K primer very, very well. And we're doing a lot of spot repairs with that. And we do a lot of demos where we mix up just 1 ounce of 2K urethane primer, and we'll put 2 pieces of 8, like regular, brochure style paper, put 2 of those up and make marks around them on a panel, and put 3 coats on in that space with 1 ounce of material. And so when you take that 1 ounce and you put that inside of a RPS disposable cup, because we have the vented cap on that RPS cup, if I need 1 ounce, I mix 1 ounce. I spray right to the last drop. There's no waste. I don't have to mix 3 ounces to get 1 ounce out. And so that's a huge benefit. So that little gun is probably the one that can make you your money back the fastest and accelerate. And now, especially now with more UV products,
Yeah,
UV,
Eric was mentioning that in the comments.
yeah, yeah, the UV primer with that. I use a 1.2. Some will use a 1.0. I like the 1.2. Um, I just made a video that we're going to release here shortly using that together with SpectraTech, and where you spray 2 coats of UV primer and you wait 3 to 8 seconds between coats, dry it for 30 seconds with the SpectraTech, and sand it. I mean, you can't get any more efficient than that.
Hmm.
And it's ready to spray. So we put it in a black RPS cup so that the light doesn't hit it, it doesn't get hard. So you leave it in your gun all day and just do your spot repairs, and it's incredibly fast.
Tony, I have like maybe 4 or 5 more questions.
Okay.
I don't know. We're hitting the hour, believe it or not. Do you mind if I give you, a few minutes if you want to, put the phone in place and you want to drink something, or
Okay. Well,
and then I call you right back.
honestly, what I need to grab a different charger because my the charger I had keeps popping up saying it's not a this is not a acceptable accessory, and it not letting my phone charge. So I'm
Stop
getting
buying
the
aftermarket.
yeah, that one in that case. But I'm going to grab my iPhone one. It needed a longer cord, so I tried the short route.
That's fine. Yeah, I will call you. I will
Give
probably
me
be back
give me
in
a
a couple
couple
of
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Be perfect. Thanks.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks. Bye.